Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them? Then do not be too eager to deal out death in judgment, for even the very wise cannot see all ends. Gandalf the Grey. Bending Not Breaking, Season 4, Episode 7, The Aftermath. And welcome back to another episode of Bending Not Breaking. I'm Sunshine.
And this is Ben.
And we are jazzed for some more Korra content, because I got to tell you,
Korra's pretty great.
I'm loving it.
I'm still loving it.
I'm loving it.
I can't wait for the rest of the series.
And this episode is another special one.
I love special ones.
We've got some guests with us today, and it's going to be amazing. Ben, who do we have with us?
Y'all, I am pleased to welcome Andrea and Paul, who are the co-hosts of Kinfolklore Pod, who I love because I actually found this podcast by, I was looking for Avatar podcasts, and then I was like, oh my God, they covered Avatar. And I was like, okay, let's check it out. And then I got to it, and the witty banter, playful, but also at the end, there's just this massive amount of theme discussion that I was like, I want to talk to them. And so, Andrea, Paul, welcome to the podcast. We're glad you're here. How are you today?
Doing good. Thanks for
having us.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Really, really excited. And we enjoy you guys too. We're happy to explore this fandom with you guys and take a little dive into Korra. We're gonna actually cover it later in probably in March at some point. So we're actually excited to get back into this world.
Exciting.
Yeah, so it's really cool.
That's awesome.
Because y'all just did a deep dive into the His Dark Materials series, correct?
Yeah,
that's a series that we started this podcast with. So we started a little over a year ago. His Dark Materials. We also covered The Witcher, and Lovecraft Country, and Avatar, and then we're going back into the world of Avatar with Korra.
Lots of rich material.
Tons. We were like we got to the end of Avatar. We wanted to go right into Korra, and then here came His Dark Materials because of timelines, and we were just like, wow, okay, well, time to take a break, and then we'll come back to it. So it's exciting to be re-entering this world. I even got my Jasmine Dragon T-shirt on.
That's so cool.
I'm ready to go.
Oh, nice.
I need that shirt. Unfortunately, don't have any Avatar merchandise. Any of our listeners, you are welcome to send me Avatar merch as a welcome, as a thank you, as a nice gift. I will accept it.
That's not even true. My fiance gave you very lovely
that's true.
ornaments.
I do have Avatar
Wow.
ornaments yes, I do have Avatar.
He's gonna be in the
true.
Sato basement. He's
you
gonna
are
be in the
trouble.
Sato basement
Yo.
at the end of this episode. They're gonna put him down there.
Yeah.
That's right.
Speaking of this is the first time that Sunshine has dropped the fact that he's engaged. I didn't want to bring it up, but since he brought it up, I'm gonna point to it. Sunshine's engaged. That's
right.
a big
That's
news.
a new thing that happened since last season. Yeah. Super excited. The proposal went terribly as planned. Like in regards to like the plan that was set, none of it worked out. But it was a wonderful day, and super excited about.
So you're saying that your
getting to marry.
engagement proposal was kind of like Zuko taking an Earth Nation lady out on the town? Is that what you're saying? Like kind of like hanging out with her.
Interesting.
Yeah. That was, except, I like to think I have a little bit more game than Zuko did.
Oh,
on
okay,
that
good.
night.
I'm glad.
But yeah, no, it was everything that we had that was kind of planned out. It was supposed to be this nice like sushi dinner, and then we were gonna it was gonna be a really nice proposal, and then the restaurant was at this point where they weren't doing outdoor seating anymore, and so they were only doing takeout, and all of this stuff that just started to fall apart. It was a whole thing. But the outcome was still what I was hoping for.
Yeah,
So
that's the
That's
important
all that
part.
matters.
Exactly. That's the important part right there. That's it.
So it worked out. But yeah. But let's talk. We're jumping into this. We're going right into Korra, and we're doing this through the lens of judgment today.
Judgment.
And I feel like there's always this connotation that comes with judgment, like never judge anything.
Yeah, judging is bad.
And I think that there's a little bit of pushback that I have onto that concept, where I almost view judgment itself as a tool, but it's how we are utilizing that tool that gives us is this a negative way to judge or a positive way to judge? Because sometimes I feel like I have to make judgments in regards to safety, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Absolutely.
And so how do we use this as a tool to navigate the world around us? So that's kind of the lens I kind of dove into this episode with. But what about y'all, Andrea, Paul? When you think of judgment, what kind of comes to mind?
When I as I was looking through the episode, I was thinking about how we make assumptions, and assumptions sometimes lead to judgment. We internally make a judgment about something or someone or a situation because of the assumptions that we come in. And I agree. I don't think that it's always bad. Like sometimes our assumptions are right, but I think we have to be mindful of the assumptions that we're making about something.
Yeah, I would share that.
Yeah.
I would share that. And there were some key moments in the episode that kind of highlighted it. There's some stuff that kind of were like, little Easter eggs and shout outs for people who followed the previous show that kind of highlighted the judgment. At some point, I guess we'll talk about for the characters that judged or what they made. But I really think that for me, it is a balancing act, right? It's like not making sure that you're not, judging somebody too harshly, judging yourself too harshly. I think self-judgment is a big thing. Like, hey, I'm not good enough, or I'm not, I'm not able to do this thing. I know, like, friends judging you or wanting to, like, people please because you're worried about your friend's judgment and the negative connotations of that. So I think a lot of that shows up in this episode, and having the courage of your convictions, as Korra does in this particular episode, for sure.
Yeah, there's so much there. I think there's, like, you just lifted up several cool things, both of you, that I'm really excited to dive into. But first, before we do, we need to remind our listeners what happened in the episode. So Sunshine is going to give a 30-second recap.
I don't know how many times I have to tell you,
episode.
when it is an odd episode number, it is your turn
You
to
are making
recap.
things up. It's your turn.
All right.
I feel like I did it last time.
You need to do the recap,
I think it's your turn.
and I will judge you harshly on
I
how
think
well
you should be judged on the fact that you never
on your
deliver
mark,
the recap.
get set, go.
So Mako and Bolin are moving in with Asami, and Korra's upset about it, but it's okay. But then police simply just break into Cabbage Corp and then condemn the innocent. And then Korra's like, oh my god, let's go to Sato Mansion. And then they drive a car, and then Asami's really cool. And then overhears Sato like, oh my god, we should, like, he's tricky.
15 seconds
He tells
left.
Chief Beifong Tenzin, and then they investigate, and is seemingly innocent. And then Mako threatens Korra with friendship. Dude, really? Dude. And then they stop Sato's trap. There's a dude, leads him to the trap. And then she's like, Asami's a total badass. And then she, Lin
3,
resigns to save the fellow
2,
officers, and that's the end.
1.
That was
a
impressive.
I'm impressed.
I missed some
I'm
things.
impressed.
Yeah, I missed some
Nothing
things.
important.
but-
Nothing important. Like, you hit
Well, thank
all
you.
the-
You know what? Again, I'm just so grateful for y'all validating me on my 30-second recap. I feel like Sunshine always judges me harshly, and y'all's validation is really just kind
Good.
and
I thought you did
uplifting.
a pretty solid job there.
You're just saying that because we have guests.
That's true. I'm on my best behavior.
I love it. It's like being at the family reunion and watching, like, your uncles and aunts fight, or, like, you know what I mean? Your uncles are beefing. You're like, this is great. It's awesome.
Yeah, it is challenging. You can see how challenging if you want to give it a try. Either of you want to test the rounds, check it out, see what it's like.
To do the 30-second
Oh,
recap. Whoo! I think I'm gonna go. I'll go for it. Why not? Here it is. So, you know what?
All right.
Let's go.
Ready?
30 seconds. We're going 30 seconds.
Set. 30 seconds on the clock.
Okay.
On your mark, get set, go.
All right, Lin Beifong is really, really stressed out because she wants to bring around the villain here, Anan, who just blew up everything inside the Bending Square, the Bending Stadium. She is go ahead and pursuing different things. They get a tip-off underneath a bridge from a guy who's actually just setting them
15
up.
seconds.
And when setting them up, they get to the basement of Sato's basement, who finds out he's got these big robots who are actually trying to take them out. But you know what? Mako and my dude Bolin save them, and they get away, and
3,
Asami, and they are going to live at
1.
the Air Temple.
Stop.
That's what I got. That's what I got.
That was pretty good.
That was
yeah.
good. That was good.
I tried to
man.
hit in the
It's amazing how
spots
much
that you
nuance on
said,
things
hey, I
you gotta
left a
take
couple out. We were going to fill in the full picture, right? So I just put in a couple of things.
That's yeah. See, that's why we do that. That's why we invite you in, and not all of like many of our guests are like, no, thank you. But that's bravery right there. I love it.
Listen, if Aang can bend by having his back thrown into a rock accidentally, I can try that for 30 seconds. It's fine. It's okay. No worries.
Nice reference. I love it.
So let's jump into the episode. What's a big moment in regards to judgment that either one of y'all saw when watching this episode?
I mean, the one that stuck out for me was Korra's assumptions about Asami. That was like the first moment I was like, whoa, okay. So she makes this comment about how she thinks that when they get to the mansion that Asami planned shopping and a makeover, which Bolin is excited about. He's like, let's go. Let's do the makeover.
Yeah, where's my pedicure?
Exactly. And I related to Bolin in that moment because I also wanted to do the makeover and shopping. But yeah, she says later, I assumed that you were prissy. And, like that sort of attitude of like assuming that someone is prissy and they're not a badass like Asami. Like you can be both of those things, right? Like she's clearly into shopping and makeup and she always looks perfect. Somewhat like Michelle Obama. But like she's also in many ways, she is in many ways a badass. I mean, I'm not even fully finished with the series yet, but like Asami is like clearly a badass. So I felt like that was the first moment where Korra sort of misjudged her and made some assumptions about her.
Honestly, the way you described that reminds me of Sokka misjudging Suki in the season 1 of Avatar, right? And it's a pretty similar concept, right? Where Suki is, dressed up, she's in her makeup, and he assumes that because she is a girl that she is incapable of fighting, and then, she gets beasted, or he gets beasted by Suki. So, and then they kiss, and so that's also similar. But like, it is what it is. There's judgment, and often judging a book by their color is, probably not the best option.
Nah. Unless you are Aang the Avatar, who has been redeemed in this series for all the judgment that the fandom and everybody heaped on him for taking out the Cabbage Man. He has been redeemed. His redemption. Okay? Listen, we knew that Cabbage Corp was a freaking malicious organization, and he got there early, and he broke up that cabbage cart every chance he got. Down with the 1%. That's all I'm saying. So I think Aang's judgment was exactly correct. Aang's judgment was correct in this case. So shout out to Aang. I
thought all that stuff was planted.
What'd you say?
I thought all the equalist stuff was planted.
It was planted, but can't you just tell that he's a little grimy? Like, I mean, you can't tell. Like, he's like... It's not like he's not hanging with Sato. We don't know for sure they're not friends, It's just, it is what it is.
Fair.
That seems a little judgy. But
listen, I will be okay being judgy because I feel like Aang's judgment was correct. The cabbage guy had it coming. That's all I'm saying. His cabbages. He even says it, my cabbage corp. Oh, it's like, you know what? That guy, his descendants turned out to be grimy 1%ers. It's fine. It's okay. It's what it is, Anyway.
I'm interested in seeing like an entire fanfic on just the creation of Cabbage Corp. Yeah. If you're listening and if you know where that is, send it my way. I want to hear about it.
Me too.
Well, even as we're kind of navigating the story of like Asami and the judgments we have about Asami, we then start to push through these judgments that Korra has on Hiroshi and what he's going on based off of the eavesdropping she's got, and she's not wrong, and I don't even know if she goes about it a wrong way, but we do start to see this moment when it comes to how that creates this weird dynamic between Mako and Bolin and Asami as she's kind of putting Hiroshi on this kind of like chopping block. And we see this moment of how easy it is for people to kind of assume like, no, Hiroshi's done so much good for me, there's no way that he's doing bad things. And we see that specifically with Mako. And how much like that's a narrative we should push back on, right? Like this idea of like, oh, Jeff Bezos gives $100,000 to environmental issues, and you're like, yeah, that he causes, and he also like got all of this money over the course of a pandemic. So like, one good deed doesn't necessarily outweigh.
Yeah, it's like the collective,
else.
Right? You guys are talking about like the collective unconscious, like that we all kind of like accept these narratives about like philanthropy and these other things to say, hey, this person must be a good person because they do this. When in actuality, it could like a lot of times people do those things as political cover, like he was doing here. So I'm with you guys. I think like that was on full display of like the assumptions that we make and judgments that we make based on the narratives that we have as a society, or in this case as Republic City. Republic City just accepted this is who he was, even though he was pretty Machiavellian in his attempts to bring down Benders.
Yeah. So I think my question there then with Mako is, when we are in that situation, does generosity cloud judgment? Or to put it another way, does Mako's feeling of indebtedness to Hiroshi cloud judgment as well? And so, and if that is the case, then when people are generous with their time, with their money, with the things that they are able to give to the world, how do we check that and balance that with the necessity of having to judge them in a way that is safe, it is healthy, that is right and good? I'm curious, what are y'all's thoughts on how we balance that act? Like, so when people are generous and we feel indebted to someone, how do we also negotiate how to encounter them when it comes to judgment?
I think it's really hard. I mean, I think that accountability is really important, so that we hold people accountable for the things that they do that can cause harm and suffering. But that doesn't, it doesn't always define them as a person. You can be we're all people, right? And so we hurt people even when we don't intend to. We can still be good people with good intentions and still cause harm. In this case, right, this is like a large conspiracy where he's planning to cause a lot of harm. So I think if Mako, like, his daughter does hold him accountable. She says, right, I love you, but like she's essentially says, but you can't get away with this, right? If Mako was able to sort of compartmentalize his feelings and then also, understand that he was something terrible was happening here, maybe he would have acted differently. But his assumption was just sort of that Korra was wrong, that Korra must have had it wrong because this is a good guy. And I think we're all vulnerable to that point of view, because we all have feelings about who people are based on what we know about them. And when something new is revealed to us, we don't want to believe the bad things. I actually think that's what makes people good, right? We want to give people the benefit of the doubt. We want to assume that they are good through and through because they're doing good acts publicly. But, we know that that's not always the case. That sometimes people are complex, but sometimes people are covering, as Paul was saying, for something more nefarious. So I think that, I understand why Mako and Bolin and Asami had this feeling about, oh no, this can't be right, Korra must be wrong, because they just didn't track with what they knew. This is a person who sponsored their team, who's shown them great kindness, and then suddenly you're saying that this is, oh no, he's actually like part of this evil movement that is wants to harm us because they're both benders, right?
And we see Mako confront that betrayal at the end. He's like, you sponsored us, you did all these things, and you could just see the contempt on his face from that betrayal.
Definitely.
There's just so much there.
Then he gets called a street rat, like Aladdin. And
Oh man,
it made me feel things.
yeah, I think it comes down to agendas too, right? It's like, what is your agenda when you're doing? So Mako, clearly he had an agenda early in the season and everything to, make their team be successful, and the sponsorship and all of those things led to more success and them getting to where they wanted to get to. So I would say, ethics always comes down to, even if it's consciously or subconsciously, kind of the school of ethical judgment that you subscribe to. And in Mako's case, I would highly believe he's a consequentialist who believes the outcome is what it's about, because he doesn't believe anything until he sees it with his own eyes and sees the outcome. And so what are the consequences of that? And I think that's very different for Korra, who is she didn't need to see everything to believe just basically this is what it is. And her agenda is very clear also, right? So when competing agendas collide, that's when you start seeing people have to question things, and that's where conflict comes in. And I think that's what you see on display. It's like there's some competing agendas happening here, getting to the truth, and hey, how do I take care of myself? And those competing agendas collided in this moment, and then in the end, they made the right choice. You know.
It's interesting to me to think about the comparison between the two also. And I think about Korra when she overhears and eavesdrops on Sato. Like, she immediately dips out and goes and finds Chief Beifong and Tenzin, right? And there is a very clear sense of what is right to Korra compared to Mako. Like, right? For Mako, it seems to value relationship very highly, but Korra, like, when Mako threatens his friendship, she's like, I don't care. Like, she is so like courageous and willing to do what she believes is right despite the friendship. And I struggle with that personally, but at the same time, I was about to say admirable. I admire Korra deeply for her courage, that she's able to just listen to her instincts and follow through with what she believes, so committed in such a committed way. I find it really compelling.
Which works out here.
Yeah.
In this moment.
Correct. Yeah.
Sometimes that does not work out so well for Korra.
I was just
Bite her
about
in
to
the
say
butt.
it's her greatest strength and also her greatest weakness, that she has so much conviction and she jumps in so quickly into things, and with that, lack of hesitation can lead to a lot of victories in life. But then it also, sometimes that lack of hesitation can also do exactly what Andrea was talking about, which is all your great intentions can lead to, you know, basically collateral damage, like things that you never thought were going to happen. And so I think like that's where Korra struggles a lot throughout the whole entire series, of like you know, jumping in and then thinking about how she's gonna get herself out of the situation later, you know.
Yeah. Wow, this is already a great episode. Thank you all for being here.
We're so happy to be
So-
here. Thank you for having us.
There's a small moment that happens in this episode as they're looking at future industries and going through Cabbage Corp and kind of doing their like raids, the police raids. You hear this radio announcer come on and starts to list off like a series of headlines, and a lot of those are pointed to kind of craft a narrative around like, did Lin Beifong mess up the first time, or were they working together, and they start to pose all these questions, but they're all very pointed questions with no answers.
BuzzFeed articles.
Yeah,
Well, it's almost like watching
it's almost
like watching
these
Tucker
headlines were
Carlson
clickbait.
talk.
Yeah.
These were all clickbait. I was listening to those too, and I was like, sounds like our media. Like it was creating this like narrative that we don't. Why is this being reported? It's none of it. You know none of the answers. How can you ask these questions? It's so irresponsible.
100%.
When it's how does that shift our judgment as we are experiencing life, and how does that shift the judgment and the narrative of the people in Republic City? How does it shift our judgment and narrative when we hear someone come on Fox News and ask like very blatant, outlandish questions with like what they are trying to get to a pointed answer? Like that is not even what
Or
is
any news
going
outlet,
on.
right?
Correct. Yeah, every news outlet is guilty of trying to push a narrative, and so it's how do we root out the truths of that? But specifically in this, it's just a bunch of random questions with no facts or details, and it's just kind of like leaving it up to the people to decide if Lin Beifong is competent in what she is doing.
Well, and
you're
it's
like,
perpetuating a culture of fear, right? It's creating more and more like angst in just the general public, and so it's more than just irresponsible. It's downright like fear-inducing,
harmful.
Yeah.
And you know what they say? You know what my boy Paul Atreides says, or was told? Fear is the great mind killer. It is. Shout out to Dune. Like that is what happens. Like that idea of fear can take over a society, and it starts with one person at a time. So it's about conquering those fears and being able, in my opinion, to understand like yourself. Like try not. That's the thing of what I thought about self-judgment earlier. Is if every time I'm ready to point a finger out, I realize that there's three pointing back at me, and I look at, well, you know, if I spot it, I've got it. If I see it in somebody else, it's probably inside of me. Where can I correct it inside myself? Because if I do that, then I'm actually making the world better rather than always calling somebody else out for their flaws. Now, there's some things we must hold our ground on, right, that are just like, hey, this is just morally corrupt that I definitely feel like I'm going to take a stance on. But most times, even in that, there's a way to get to peace rather than conflict.
Yeah, I've learned from a prior episode that I'm supposed to gesture with my whole hand, all my fingers pointing the same direction rather than having several pointed back at me. So I learned that from Sunshine.
Yeah, that's kind of the workaround, is if you point all of your fingers in one direction.
I dig that. I'm going to try that one day.
Yeah.
You know? Like, that's it.
What were some other moments of judgment that popped up in this episode?
I think the poor judgment that came out of a place of pain of Mr. Sato there. He was in pain. Like, that's where a lot of this stuff comes from. He had a need to avenge his wife's death, right? So his actions were like, somebody wrongfully took someone I love from me. So he made some poor judgments. He aligned with somebody who has a very, nefarious agenda. He utilized his remarkable wealth and skill, because it's not easy to build those robots and everything else that he built, to be able to do that. So I think poor judgment is also something to think about here too. He legitimately made the wrong judgment call about society and about a whole group of people. He thought that benders in all were wrong because a group of benders did something that was wrong. And I think those sweeping indictments of a whole group of people are always poor judgment. So I think that's a judgment I saw really clearly in the episode.
Yeah, I think about this moment with when he starts going on this story about his whole reason for doing what he's doing and talking to Asami, and it's heart-wrenching for Asami to be I put myself in Asami's position, and I sit there and listen to that as my father is who I've cared about, and I didn't believe this of him, is now just yelling at me, telling me what is going on, and I feel such deep remorse and sadness for Asami and her experience. And I think about what would lead me, what position would I have to be in to make the same choice that Sato is in. And for Hiroshi to make that decision, I think about myself. I think about, as you said, the amount of pain I would have to be in for that to be my choice is so immense. And it just really cultivates a sense of compassion. Now, it doesn't cultivate a sense of forgiveness necessarily yet, but it does cultivate a sense of compassion and understanding. And I think that that's really important when we think about judging people who judge.
Yeah.
When we think about how we judge others, and it's really important to come at it from a place of what would I have to be? What position would I have to be in order to make that same decision? Because I don't know. Sometimes it's unfathomable.
I mean, a lot of the rendering, right, of the avatar itself comes out of a lot of different spiritual traditions around restoring balance, and you see that very clearly, obviously, in the air nomads and how they go about their business in the world. But even in the other nations, there is that feeling of the avatar will bring balance. And a lot of the traditions like Buddhism, and even I read a book about nonviolent communication where it talks about letting go this concept of rightness and wrongness and understanding the needs of the person underneath that's enacting this thing, right? So this person has a true need for right now his need is for closure on the loss of his wife. He's using terrible things and tools to do it, but he feels like it's never been, avenged. The justice was not served by benders being able to just swiftly take away someone that he loves just because he doesn't have that power. And so the better course would have been to have a dialogue to get to the course of how it could be made right. But at that point, he is, firm in his rightness that he should be able to avenge this, as are the benders firm is that he's wrong. And the conflict, normally Korra's task is going to be, as we see later in the series, to make right and balance out the non-benders and the benders and their feelings towards each other, because without it, all you're going to have is war in the city, So that's I think what's on display.
Yeah, I think that he's sort of a stand-in for the equalist followers, right? He's aggrieved in a very real way. This is a horrible thing that happened to his family, having the Agni Kai gang kill his wife. And so I think it allows us to see why people would follow this movement, why Amon is a compelling villain, because they feel aggrieved and oppressed by some of the benders.
Yeah. Just again, like the amount of true, real grievances that the equalist movement has it's really tragic that Amon capitalizes it in such a fundamentalist and extremist way that like it kind of does the movement forces a backstep in a way. But I also think that it really is lifting up an important dynamic between benders and non-benders that clearly Korra was impervious to prior to coming to Republic City. But there's just so much there that unless you've experienced what it is like to not have the privilege of bending, that you don't have the judgment and the capacity to make a judgment on on what it would be like to not have bending, right? You lose your it's a sense of like you take it for granted, right? You assume that everybody lives the way that you do if you never check yourself.
Yeah, it's very, very much so. I think that is a big part about what's happening here is that people are making snap judgments about whole groups of people, and that somebody has seen in the vacuum a way to in the vacuum of leadership. Because let's be honest, there's a void of the council is not working out. Can we just say that, like, that this council is not working out? Like,
yeah, I think we can say that.
In the void of leadership, you can get someone who rises up. I don't know, maybe we just lived through the last 4 years that can make aggrieved people or people feel like, man, there's only one course of action. There's only one way to deal with this. And you point to other people as the problem versus figuring out ways to bring about each person to the table. And that is something that's like concerning whenever someone's like, that's what the core of xenophobia is, right? Like calling someone else that's the other and saying like, hey, they're the reason for all your problems, this group of people or this group of people. And there's never enough blame. So I think that's what's happening. Anon has tapped into fear, pain, like real true things that I never even thought about till we got to Republic City, that bending that could cause problems in society for like people who are non-benders. The way that we dunk on Sokka about being a non-bender all the time, and like they dunked at him so much in the previous series. So I think like it's important to like parse these things out and like think about how we can live in harmony and not look at one group as like totally responsible for your pain. That's a big piece.
Yeah. And we see Sokka as a really important and necessary teacher for Aang in the comics. So if you like, FYI, I'm not going to spoil those, but there's again a huge important piece for Sokka being the non-bender as a teacher for Aang, that kind of leads into where we are today.
Yeah,
with
no,
Korra.
I can't wait till we're going to actually cover those leading up to our Korra coverage, and there's so much in there. I agree with you. I definitely agree with you on that. That's awesome.
Okay. Any other moments of judgment that you all noticed in the episode?
Here's one for me that sticks out, and I don't know if judgment is the perfect lens for this, but this is a moment that there's the moment where our Tenzin and Lin and Korra jump into Hiroshi's office and ask him about what he's doing. And he responds at some point with the line, "It's just business, nothing nefarious." And I want to push back on this idea that because it's like, oh, it's business, it's not personal, so morally it's fine, is like, that's not a thing.
Yeah.
Is that like business can be nefarious, and we see that it is. Even as we see like even this idea of like, no, I'm taking advantage of someone else's loss for my own personal gain is like, yeah, maybe don't. But like this idea of like that. We see kind of here this issue with capitalism here of like let's put dollars before people as opposed to people before dollars, and what that actually means in regards to he's funding all of this war stuff with all of this extra money. It was just an interesting moment to me of just kind of like I wanted to push back against this idea
just a little bit.
It's just business, nothing nefarious. Like, nope, super nefarious.
Very, very, very nefarious, for sure. No question. Oh, man. I love that point. I agree. I totally agree.
I also want to point out that he has a secret tunnel.
Secret tunnel.
Well done. Well done. Oh my gosh. Well done. Who said he's not a bender? Who said it, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
So I want to lift one up, and then I'll invite you all to lift another. But for me, one of the things that I want to lift up is we see this moment with Tano at the beginning of the episode, who has his bending is gone now because of Amon, and we see him physically looking completely different. His character is completely different. His voice is different. His whole relationship with how he presents himself is changed. And I think that what this does is gives us a picture, gives us an image, gives us a thing to think about when it looks like when we remove bending from a person and a part of their identity from a person. When we take away a portion of what has garnered them, it is the way that he has moved throughout the world has been reliant on his bending, his job, everything. And that was taken away. And this really throws into sharp relief the immense nature of Aang's judgment to take away Ozai's bending. And just the act of removing a part of someone's identity, regardless if that piece of their identity has the capacity to cause harm. There's so much involved in that really shows just the immense nature of that act of judgment. And so I just wanted to lift that up. I don't know that I have a big learning I can take away from it, but I noticed it and I wanted to bring our attention to it.
It reminded me of Azula at the end of book 3 of Avatar. She's going through so much, and it's taking a toll on her mentally and physically, and her whole demeanor becomes something else. This person who is always in control starts to lose control. And it reminded me very much of that moment with her where suddenly we're not able to recognize her as the same person anymore, because everything that she had, everything that she believed about herself, her role in the Fire Nation had changed suddenly and is slipping away from her. So I think that's a really good moment that you're calling out there, because it's a small moment, right, in the larger part of this larger plot of the episode, but it's significant.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. What about y'all? Do y'all have another moment of judgment that you all noticed from the episode?
I don't know about any more judgment. I don't have like I do. I mean, I guess I think the part that really stands out to me is Toph's legacy lives on in Lin Beifong. Oh my gosh! Like and the fact that she would decide that the best course of action would be to get outside of the trappings of what she perceives as maybe the problem, that her actual position in the police force is actually inhibiting her ability to find the answers, that there's things she won't be able to get to without leaving.
Let's break some rules.
That tough energy of like, I'm going to break some rules is really there and present. And I think it's interesting because she has a complicated relationship with her mom, and that unfolds later on as you get going in the series. But there's so much of her in there in the sense of like, hey, I'm going to break some rules. I'm going to this is how I'm going to be best used, is I can't play with the color within these lines anymore. And you see so much of Toph in that. And I think that part really stood out to me.
Well, and what that does for me is it brings up the difference between legality, morality, and how we make that judgment, right? And so Lin made the decision saying, in order to do what is right, what is moral, I need to go outside of the legality that I am confined by in this position. And I think that is a judgment that we all need to be very prescient around, because often, frankly, the laws that we have in place are not always moral and ethical. And so how do we continue to aspire to laws that are ethical and moral? And how do we confront, condemn laws that are not. And I think that Lynn's doing this is a really resistant act, but also a very resilient act. And I thank you for bringing attention to that. I actually didn't write that down, so I love that. That's awesome.
It really stood out. Republic City is struggling from that, what you're talking about this idea around morality versus the law of the land. You know, that's really where the problem, I think, sits. Of all the things we've been talking about is, you know, like, let's face it, there's been gangs of benders that have been, you know, tearing up the city, you know, and like non-benders are probably having to deal with that. So there's a reason and a cause for this uprising a little bit too. So and they need to look at the laws in place and whether those are moral and how they work. So yeah, I'm with you, man. I think that's a good call out that you made.
Ooh, lots of good stuff that we've been able to engage with. Before we kind of move on to our next segment, are there any other big moments of judgment that we want to talk about before we move on to some gratitude and some intentions and devotions?
I think I'm good. Yeah, I don't got anything. I think. How about you, Andrea?
Yeah.
All right.
I think we covered so much.
I think for me, just to re-highlight how hard the, like, looking at your parent and seeing them fall from either a pedestal or like our expectations of what our parents should be, and Asami having to rumble with that and still make the decision that she did, and still make that judgment call.
And that's why I love her.
It's just so, like, how that's so hard. It's so hard. I feel like we see it all the time in the way that we engage with our parents, older generations, when it comes to different ideologies or things that they may share, and this idea of like, oh no, it's from a different time. And you're like, well, they still lived through that time. Like, they still had the opportunity to change. And kind of just this idea of how do we push back and challenge these people that we love or care about or gave us shelter, and then see something so fundamentally wrong and say, no, this is wrong. I got to stand up to it. And so I think that's for Asami is
well, and think about the
so
privilege
hard,
that, like,
she did it.
Had we not, like, it ends up working out for her, but like thinking about what she might have gone through and equating it to what could happen in our current state of affairs. If someone were, for instance, to come out to a parent and say, hey, this is something I believe in, and I think that, you know, LGBTQ rights are important, and then they're like, nope, bye, and then they get kicked out, and then all of a sudden they're homeless. But Asami thankfully had a place to go. She had a shelter to live in.
Where not everyone does.
And not everyone does. Not everyone has the, like, frankly, the privilege that Asami has to be ostracized from her home, but then to have somewhere to go. Like, that is a huge deal that could have completely changed her life and the scope of her being. But thankfully, Asami had somewhere to go.
Totally.
Oh, okay. So this has been a lot of juicy stuff. I love this lens that we've been able to dive into on judgment. So thank you for being here so far. What we're going to do is we're going to take a short break, everyone. We're going to take a short break. We're going to have a nice little musical interlude for you all to enjoy in your earbuds. And then we will come back with our lens of judgment through the element of what element?
Fire.
That's right. And so we'll see you back in or I guess we won't see you, but you know the deal. We'll
it's
be
a
back in a few
podcast,
seconds.
Ben. We're the host of a podcast. We don't see anybody.
Don't make fun of me.
I'm sorry. All right.
All right. Short break. Here we go. Everyone, welcome back. I am so glad you got to enjoy some music in your ears, maybe a little pee break. You might just still be listening in the car driving, whatever it is, it's fine. No matter, welcome back. We're glad you're here. So what we're going into is we're going into our two final segments with Andrea and Paul, and they have kindly joined us for this part too, so thank you again. First, as you all know, we are doing our devotion. And so with this devotion this week, we are looking at the lens of judgment through the element of fire. And our goal is to set an intention or a goal for the coming week that we can kind of learn from, grow from, and become better. That's the goal. How do we become better based off of this lens and this element? So Sunshine, I'm handing it off to you. what is your intention? What is your goal for the coming week?
So some might say that I have a little fire in me personality-wise when you look at like the personality elements of fire, and sometimes that can come off as very confident, and that sometimes can definitely fall into the idea of cocky or overconfident. And there's a moment where Mako apologizes to Korra for his reactions based off of the way that he behaved earlier. And I want to kind of model that this week. There are times where I am wrong, and to be able to step into that space, I'm owning it, Ben. Give me a second. let me get there. I want to be able to be the person who can acknowledge that, apologize, step into that space, and learn from it. And I think that to kind of push back on the judgments that I might have had earlier on. Ideally, think more about those judgments and press on them as they're happening, but also a willingness to be wrong, accept that I'm wrong, and learn from those moments is something that I want to have intention for this week.
Yeah, I think you do that well already, to be fair, but I'm excited to see how you grow from this week.
Progress, not perfection. Just want to keep getting better.
Yeah. Wow, I love that. Okay, so Andrea or Paul, either of you are welcome to join in. Who's next? Who wants to share?
You go ahead,
I can go next. Yeah. So I thought about this, how judgment kind of grows like fire, right? It can start with a very small flames or embers and then turn into an inferno. And I think what I would like to do is take a step back. Like, Mr. Sato allowed his judgment of benders to grow into something very nefarious. And I would like to be mindful of my assumptions about others and not let them grow further beyond what they are. So just, when they come up, just take a moment, step back. Is this actually true, or am I judging someone based on limited information or one experience? So I think that's where I thought about it.
I love that. So tempering the flame by asking those questions. I think that's beautiful. Wow. I love this exercise. It always baffles me how, doing things like this can help us see like Avatar in a whole new way. And anyway, it's so cool. Paul, what about you?
Yeah, so anybody who knows me knows I love Uncle Iroh. In fact, I'm wearing him on my chest today, So I love Uncle Iroh, and it made me think this part about his conversation with Zuko, where he talks about the fire element is the element of power. And people of the Fire Nation have desire and will and energy and drive to achieve what they want. So I'm going to use my judgment this week in that element of fire to channel my energy positively and not through the lens of any biases. That's my intention. So to listen more to people, to understand them before I seek to be understood, and to channel that fire energy to not be destructive, but in building and in warming and in like enhancing the relationships that I have.
Yeah, that's really neat. I love that. Oh,
You're up.
These
it's
are
your
tough.
turn. Yeah.
Yeah. These are big.
You've got to follow up 3 amazing.
I know. So that's hard. I guess what I've been thinking about is this, similar to what you were talking about, Andrea. Actually, is just the safety element of fire, right? And how when fire goes unchecked, as you mentioned, it can turn into this raging inferno, but also it can turn into the wildfires that scorch California and Australia and all around the world, right? And how do we temper that? How do we do it in a way that makes it so that, because once it gets to that stage, it's hard to control. And so for me, it's thinking about the safety involved of my judgments, and not just others' safety, but my safety. Like, when I'm really struck by, again, you mentioned it a few times, Paul, but the way we judge ourselves. And so I think about, like, where is the fire existing around my self-judgment that is going unchecked and could evolve and turn into something that is a conflagration that is beyond my control. And I guess the lesson is, one, I can't control any of it because it is what it is. But I can do my best to work through it and quell the flames that of self-judgment. And so I guess for me, I'm going to be, especially as I go into this starting school again for this semester, I am filled with anxiety. And so I would just want to really put a pause on my self-judgments and question them and figure out what is the balm, what is the water bottle that I can pour out some of those fires to guide me as I judge myself. That was a little long-winded, but I did my best.
No,
I had to
so
follow 3
important,
great
though.
ones.
It was
so
lovely.
important. I agree.
Yeah,
it was really good.
important to check your self-judgment. And I think that we see Korra do that. Like, she has to do that regularly. That's how she evolves as a character. She's pretty hard on herself, and it undermines her power and her courage sometimes. And I think it's a really important thing to realize that we don't just judge other people, we judge ourselves as well. And so I think that's great.
Me too.
Thank
I
you.
think so. Yeah, it's great.
I'm grateful for you lifting that up. So thank y'all so much for everything that y'all have said through that process. It's always an interesting practice to go through. But speaking about being grateful and characters we're grateful for specifically,
You did that on purpose.
It's time for our.
It was a segue. It was a good segue.
Seamless, and you just put up a big old barrier in front of it. It's our gratitude segment, y'all.
Yeah.
I
It was for
doing
comedic
so
effect.
well, and you said you did that on purpose.
I'm
Of
grateful
course
for that
I did.
amazing segue. I'm grateful for that
Thank
segue.
you
That was
so
amazing. That's good.
Well, let's talk about the characters we're grateful for. Let's talk about gratitude. Andrea, Paul, y'all are welcome to go first. Who's a character that you're grateful for this episode?
I'm gonna go with what would seem to be a tough take. It would seem to be a one that people would be like, huh? Why are you grateful for that guy? He's trash. But I'm gonna go with Hiroshi Sato, and not for the reasons that you may think. You know, like I think that what I'm grateful for about Hiroshi Sato is, you know, to put in a phrase, but for the grace of God, there go I, right? Like that example of what can happen to a human being if they hold on to bitterness and resentment and think that they can control an outcome. I'm thankful for that example of what that is, so I don't go there and can avoid that. That example of what that is can also help us to not go down that path and root out those things inside of ourselves that lead to like a downward spiral. Because had he been able to make peace with himself about the loss of his wife, then none of this plays out like this for him. So his outcome really is in his own hands. So that attitude of like, I can, you know, really impact my outcome by my mental state and where I am in my thought process and how I deal with myself, that self-judgment we were talking about, to really do it positively. That is why I'm grateful for him, because he is a very strong example of breaking trust and with yourself first, and what resentment and gratitude can do, and then the loss of that relationship with his daughter, what that led to. And so you don't get anything positive out of a negative approach. So that's why I think I'm grateful for him to learn that lesson.
Thank you for that. That was incredibly articulate. I loved it.
No, I like the
Wow.
guy. I liked him before he was a trash bag. You know what I mean? What I want to say, I felt Asami's pain. I was like, oh man, that's terrible. Anyway.
Well, Andrea, who are you grateful for?
I am grateful for Lin Beifong. I'm grateful for her courage to stand up when she knows something is wrong. And I thought about her. At the end of this episode, she makes a very difficult decision, which is to put herself in her position last and put her people and what's right first. And, you know, in my day job, I am a leader of a team of people who look to me to stand up for to the larger institution when they think something isn't going right. And it can be really hard to make that, well, if I say this, then, you know, I could get in trouble, or, you know, it's hard to balance my own self-interest and ambition and what is right for the people who I manage and supervise. And so I like to think about characters who put their people first. And she really makes a decision to step outside the law because her officers have been captured and hurt, and she wants to stand up for them. So I really admire that, and I'm very grateful for her example.
Mm-hmm.
I admire all those things too. Those are like, this practice makes me appreciate characters more. I like this.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll go, and then Sunshine, you can go. Is
Sure.
that fair? So for me, I want to talk about Asami more because we didn't talk about her enough, because we never talk
We
about
never
Asami
did. You
enough,
can never
because
talk about Asami enough.
She is a
Ever.
goddess.
She is.
But yeah, the reason I'm grateful for her is a lot about what we talked about. This moment where she chooses to go against family in order to do what she believes is right. Because many of us, I was about to say we are all, but like many of us are pretty heavily confronted with family who have very different ideals than we do around what is right. And especially in our political environment nowadays, we are just constantly being in flux with what is allowed to be talked about at the dinner table. What are the taboo topics? And not only does she just like bypass the topic, but she zaps dad, and it's just really an example for us. And I don't necessarily suggest that we should all electrocute our parents or the people we disagree with, but I right? But I do think that her modeling this really gives us capacity for, and seeing how it turns out in the long run gives me hope that we can stand up to the people who we disagree with, who we love and deeply cherish, and still emerge with progress. That's why I'm grateful for Asami.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Absolutely. Fantastic. All right, mine, I'm going Mako. And it's for what I lifted up in my devotion segment. This idea of, I think too many times we get challenged with not having the right answer or doing something incorrectly, and we double down on it, or we build up a big defense, or we start talking about intent instead of impact, and all of these things come to a head. And I appreciate the way that he just said, I was wrong. This friendship is important to me. I made a mistake, and owning that. And I think that that's something that if all of us could do that just like a little bit better.
Just a little bit better.
Just a little bit better.
We're a lot better.
Then the where we would be societally would just be so much further down the line than where we feel like we are now. So that's a moment for me Mako's my character.
Yeah. Man. Y'all, this has been an exceptional exceptional episode full of wonderful content. So thank you for being here. It's been so cool.
Before we
thank
leave,
you so much
can you
for
tell us
having us.
Yeah, we've enjoyed
absolutely and before we go, tell us all the places where we can find all of the content from y'all. Where, because I'm sure that people heard this episode and said, "Yep,
I want to hear more of them."
We got another podcast to add to the list." And so, where can we find all your stuff?
Well, yeah, man. First, before we even go that deep into, I just want to say, like Tangible, thank you. This has been so fun to talk, and we enjoy you guys, and we enjoy, talking about the show. But it's really great to meet with other people that are as passionate as us about, this world. So, you can find our stuff. Kinfolklore is the name of the podcast. It's across any place where you get podcasts: Stitcher, Apple, Spotify, all those different places, and then. You also can find us at Kinfolklore Pod on Twitter and Kinfolklore Pod on Instagram. And then we have a Kinfolklore Facebook page where we do a lot of interacting with people there. So please follow us there as well. And or reach out to us at kinfolklore@gmail.com. So any of those places.
All the cool things. Yeah, and remember, everyone, you can find us at BNB_pod on all the same things. We also have a TikTok and a Patreon. If you want to join us on Patreon and support us that way, we would super appreciate it. That'd be cool. We have lots of cool perks on there. You get live episodes every now and then with us. You can join us for a live episode. Join our Facebook group where we have all of our patrons in discussing episodes. You can suggest lenses for future episodes. And all around, lots of cool stuff. Bonus episodes, lots of cool stuff. I recommend it.
All the goodies.
All the goodies. Also, supporting us by giving us, a 5-star review. Always appreciated. If it's really good, we'll read it on the podcast.
Yeah. Amazing. Like, subscribe, all the things. Y'all, thank you so much. Andrea Paul, thank you so much for being here and taking time out of your day to talk with us. We've loved having you. Always welcome back for another episode. There's so many more seasons of Korra that we could talk about. So more than happy to have y'all back on the show. But Listeners, thank you so much for listening. I'm Sunshine Mayfield.
This has been Pruitt.
And this has been Bending, Not Breaking. Thank y'all so much.
Bye-bye.